The planet of Hynaris had always been a beacon of peace in the galaxy. Nestled in a remote part of the cosmos, its inhabitants lived simple, content lives. Their world was a paradise. Lush forests, sparkling rivers, and serene mountains stretched across the surface. The people of Hynaris lived in harmony with nature, untouched by the chaos of galactic war. But that was before the Galactic Empire decided to claim it was on a quiet evening when the first signs of the Empire's arrival became apparent. Nira, a young girl with deep brown eyes and wild, untamed hair, sat on the porch of her home, watching the stars. Her mother, Elora, worked quietly in the garden, humming a soft tune as the wind rustled the leaves of the trees. Life was peaceful, calm, until it wasn't that a strange rumble shook the ground, far deeper than any storm. Nira's heart skipped a beat, and she stood up, scanning the horizon. Above the distant mountains, the first of the massive Empire warships appeared, dark, metallic, and looming. Their engines roared as they descended from the sky, casting shadows over the village below. The people of Hynaris had never seen such ships before. They had no words for what was happening. Elora turned to Nira, her face pale, but her voice steady. "Hi, Nira. Don't ask questions. Just go." Before Nira could respond, the ground beneath them trembled with an explosion. A deep, fiery glow filled the sky as the first blast from the warship struck the nearby hills, sending debris flying. Panic rippled through the village, and the cries of the people echoed through the air. Elora grabbed Nira's hand, pulling her toward their home's underground shelter. Nira struggled to keep up, her young legs unable to match her mother's speed. "Mama, what's happening?" "What is that?" she gasped, looking up at the ships. "They're coming for us," Elora replied grimly. "The Empire. We've heard the stories. They take what they want, destroy what they don't need. We have to survive." But just as they reached the shelter, a squad of Empire soldiers descended on the village. Dressed in black armor, their weapons gleaming with deadly precision, they moved like shadows through the chaos. Nira's heart raced as her mother shoved her into the shelter and sealed the door behind her. "Stay hidden, Nira. Don't make a sound," Elora whispered through the crack of the door, her eyes filled with both love and fear. "No matter what, stay safe." Just as Nira's mother turned to leave, a blaster shot echoed through the air. Nira gasped, but her mother did not flinch. She turned back, giving her a final, reassuring smile. "I'll be right back. Stay hidden." The door to the shelter closed, and Nira was left in the dark, alone, her breath heavy and fast in the silent space. Through the small crack in the shelter, she could see the chaos unfold. The Empire soldiers were rounding up the villagers, taking them away in chains, their faces stoic and emotionless. Elora, her mother, stood between them and the others, shouting, trying to protect the children and the elderly. But the soldiers were too many. Nira's heart thudded in her chest. She wanted to run to her mother, to fight back, but she was frozen in fear. She watched helplessly as they took Elora, her mother's cries echoing in her ears as she was dragged away. Nira's world shattered in that moment. The Empire had not just attacked their home. They had taken everything. Her mother, her family, the world she knew. The last thing she heard before the shelter door sealed shut was the haunting cry of her mother. Asterisk, "They've taken my mama." Asterisk. And with that, everything went dark. General Ruth *** was a name that sent shivers down the spines of entire galaxies. A human, one of the few who had risen to such power within the Galactic Empire. Unlike most of his counterparts, Ruth was not known for his cruelty for the sake of cruelty. No, his ruthlessness was born from a singular purpose: efficiency. He did not enjoy conquest. He didn't take pleasure in the destruction. But he had a job to do, and he did it with cold precision. As he sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Titan, the dark metallic corridors seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the warship's engines. His hands were clasped in front of him as he stared at the tactical display in front of him. The planets in the Hynaris system blinked on the map, one by one, as the Empire's forces advanced. *** General. Asterisk asterisk came the voice of his second-in-command, Captain Zara, her tone respectful yet firm. We've secured all the civilians from the village. The rest of the planet's defenses are weak, but they're still resisting. Ruth glanced at the holographic image of the captured villagers. Among them, a young girl stood out, her face defiant even as she was chained like the others. It was the same girl from the images they had received earlier. Nira, her name was. Ruth studied her image for a long moment. Noting her posture, the fire still burning in her eyes despite everything that had happened to her. There was something about her that intrigued him. His mind flickered back to the raid on Hynaris. The Empire's forces had swooped in like vultures, annihilating resistance before it could even form. But the people of Hynaris fought back in ways that Ruth had never expected. They weren't soldiers. At least, they weren't trained in the traditional sense, but they fought with desperation. They fought with a fury that almost rivaled his own soldiers. And yet, they had fallen. Ruth knew the galaxy. He had crushed entire worlds before, brought them to their knees, and wiped them from the stars. Yet the people of Hynaris were different. It wasn't just their fierce will to resist, it was their resilience. Even as they were dragged away, shackled and broken, their faces still burned with the will to rise again. And that was what unsettled Ruth. He didn't fear them. He simply didn't understand them. Asterisk, asterisk, set up the execution. Asterisk, asterisk, Ruth ordered coldly, his voice unshaken as he turned away from the tactical screen. We need to make an example of them. The galaxy will see what happens when they resist the Empire. His officers nodded, but Ruth felt a flicker of doubt within himself. He hated this part of the war. The bloodshed, the terror. He had lived through it all, fought countless battles, and survived the worst the Empire could throw at him. But there was something about Hynaris that gnawed at him, something that reminded him of the humanity he had long buried. Despite his cold command, Ruth found himself unable to look away from Nira's image. Her face, her resolve, the raw, untamed fury that burned in her eyes. He had seen that same spark in the eyes of countless enemies. He had seen it in the eyes of those who had tried to resist him, and it was always broken, always snuffed out by his military might. But something told him that this girl, this child, would not be so easily defeated. His hands clenched around the armrests of his chair, the metallic groan of the ship beneath him echoing through the command room. Asterisk, asterisk, General. What are your orders regarding the girl? Captain Zara asked, bringing him back to reality. Her voice was cautious, aware that Ruth's mood had shifted. Ruth's gaze lingered on the image of Nira. Her defiance was impressive, but it would be crushed. It always was. But he couldn't help but wonder, asterisk, asterisk, let her live. For now. Asterisk, asterisk, Ruth said, his voice quieter, almost contemplative. Keep her in the brig. She may prove useful later. Zara raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She had learned long ago not to question Ruth's decisions. If he saw something in this girl, it was something that others couldn't see. Ruth stood up from his chair and walked over to the massive viewport that looked out into space. His gaze drifted to the stars, and he thought about the countless battles he had fought, the lives he had taken, and the empires he had toppled. In the distance, the blue glow of Hynaris flickered faintly, its people broken, scattered, but not yet gone. Ruth didn't know why, but he felt an unease settling in his chest. He had always been a conqueror, a man of war. But something about this world, something about Nira, felt different. Perhaps it was the fact that she reminded him of something he had lost long ago, something human. Years passed, and the galaxy moved on. The Empire had long since crushed the last remnants of Hynaris' resistance, but Nira, though young, had not forgotten. She spent every waking moment honing herself for one singular purpose. Revenged at her once innocent eyes, filled with the wonder of a peaceful world, were now steely and hardened, filled only with the burning desire to reclaim her home and take back everything that had been stolen from her. Nira was no longer the terrified girl hiding in the dark shelter on the day the Empire attacked. She had become something more. She had joined a secret group of resistance fighters, a network that had sprouted in the wake of the Empire's occupation of various worlds. They were scattered across the galaxy, small pockets of defiance that were always one step ahead of the Empire. Nira was not the leader of this resistance, but her name was whispered in the dark corners of space as a symbol of defiance. There were many who did not understand her obsession with General Ruth, the man who had personally commanded the capture of her mother. Many believed he was nothing more than a pawn in the larger war machine of the Empire. But for Nira, he was the embodiment of everything that had destroyed her life. He was the one who had looked down upon her people, who had seen them as nothing more than a resource to be consumed and discarded. She didn't just want him dead. She wanted him to understand the price of his cruelty. She wanted him to see what he had taken. Every night, she trained in secret, pouring every ounce of her grief and rage into perfecting her skills. The Resistance had supplied her with weapons, tactical knowledge, and access to elite training programs, but it was her own determination that made her deadly. She learned everything: combat techniques, infiltration tactics, hacking Empire systems, using their own technology against them. The day came when Nira received the intel she had been waiting for. Ruth's flagship, the Titan, would be docked at a remote outpost near the Dairon Nebula. It was a strategic location, but more importantly, it was an opportunity, a single window of time when Ruth would be vulnerable. This was it, her moment. She had waited years for this. The Resistance had provided her with a small, stealth ship equipped with advanced cloaking technology. She would infiltrate the Empire's facility under the cover of darkness. She would slip past their defenses, infiltrate the flagship, and find Ruth. The stakes were clear. Failure meant capture, or worse. But Nira had made peace with that. She had nothing left to lose. The operation began with a level of precision Nira had never imagined. The ship glided through the nebula, its cloaking system keeping it undetected. Every decision was calculated, every move executed with military precision. She navigated through the complex labyrinth of Empire ships, evading detection with the kind of skill only someone who had lived through the nightmare of Hynaris could possess. As she neared the Titan, she felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. The ship loomed ahead like a fortress, its dark form dominating the space around it. This was the heart of the Empire's military might. This was where it all started. Nira's heart pounded as she landed her ship on a hidden dock beneath the belly of the warship. She slipped into the shadows, her heart beating in rhythm with the steady hum of the Titan's engines. She knew the layout of the ship. She had studied it for years, every corridor, every vent, every security system. But even with all her preparation, there was something unsettling about the ship's sheer size and power. She moved quickly, quietly, her senses heightened. Her mission was simple: find Ruth, take him out. But she knew it wouldn't be that easy. The Titan was filled with hundreds of soldiers, officers, and high-ranking officials, all loyal to the Empire. And Ruth himself. If she didn't kill him, he would surely kill her. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Nira reached the command center, the heart of the Titan. It was guarded by two heavily armed soldiers, but she neutralized them without a sound. They fell to the floor, their bodies hidden in the shadows. She slipped past them, moving like a phantom, silent and unnoticed. She reached the inner sanctum where Ruth's quarters were located, her pulse racing in her ears. She had no backup, no reinforcements. It was just her, alone, against the full might of the Empire. As she approached the doors to his room, she hesitated. She had spent so long fantasizing about this moment. This exact moment. But now, in the silence before the storm, doubt crept in. Was she ready? Was she capable of ending it all here? Nira took a deep breath. She didn't need to doubt. She had already come too far. She was ready. With a swift motion, she kicked open the door, and there he was. General Ruth. He was standing by the large viewport, looking out into the vastness of space. His back was to her, but she could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing, the calm, collected manner that had always defined him. Nira's hand went to the blaster at her side, her fingers brushing the cool metal. It was time. But just as she stepped forward, Ruth spoke, his voice calm and measured. "You're here for revenge." Her breath caught in her throat. "I'm here to stop you," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Ruth didn't turn around. He knew she was there. He had known the moment she arrived. "You think you can stop me?" he asked, his voice almost gentle. "You're just a child who has lost everything. What makes you think you can win?" Nira raised the blaster, her hand steady now. She had come this far. There was no turning back, but Ruth's words lingered in her mind. Asterisk, asterisk, you don't know what you're dealing with. She was not a child anymore. She was human, and humanity had never given up, never stopped fighting. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The silence in Ruth's quarters was deafening. Nira stood there, blaster in hand, her heart pounding in her chest. She had dreamt of this moment for years, had imagined it 1,000 times, but now that she was standing in front of the man who had destroyed her world, she could hardly bring herself to speak. Ruth hadn't even turned around, still staring out into the vastness of space, his hands clasped behind his back in the calm, composed manner she had come to expect from him. The air between them seemed thick, like it was charged with the tension of an impending storm. That Nira's voice, when it came, was steady, but the weight of her words felt like 1,000,000 stars crushing down on her. "You took my mother. You took my world. And you think you can get away with it?" Ruth's lips curled into a thin smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. He remained facing the window, the reflection of the stars shimmering on the glass. "You think I'm the cause of all your pain, don't you? But you're wrong, girl. I'm just the instrument. The Empire is the one that took everything from you. I just followed orders." Nira's eyes narrowed, the blaster still aimed at his back. "Orders? That's your excuse." She took a step forward, her voice now thick with contempt. "You're nothing but a puppet who hides behind excuses. You think you're some kind of warrior, but you're just a coward who can't take responsibility for the lives you've destroyed." Ruth finally turned, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. There was something in his gaze, a glimmer of recognition, something unsettling in the way he regarded her, like he saw beyond the anger, beyond the hatred. "You think I enjoy this?" he said, his tone softer now, almost contemplative. "I don't. I never did. But I've learned that it's not about enjoyment. It's about survival. The strong survive, and the weak are crushed. That's how the galaxy works." Nira's breath quickened, and for a moment, she thought of her mother, of the woman who had fought so hard to protect her, who had held her close as the Empire took everything from them. She remembered the last words her mother had whispered to her as she was dragged away. Asterisk, stay strong, Nira. You have the strength within you to do what's right. Asterisk. Nira's fingers clenched around the blaster, her grip tightening with the fire of her mother's spirit. "You're wrong," she said, her voice now filled with absolute certainty. "It's not about survival. It's about standing up for what's right. It's about fighting for those who can't fight for themselves." Ruth's gaze flickered, a faint shadow of doubt passing through his features. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the cold, unyielding resolve that had made him one of the Empire's most feared generals. Asterisk, asterisk, you'll never understand. Asterisk, asterisk, Ruth said, his voice barely a whisper. You've never known what it means to do what's necessary. You're just a child, caught in the aftermath of a war you never asked for. For the first time, Ruth's words hit her like a physical blow. Nira's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. She had been a child when it all began, but no more. She had fought for every inch of her survival. Every step of her journey had been about understanding her true strength. And now, she finally realized what had always made the difference between the Empire and the people who resisted it. Asterisk, asterisk, humanity, asterisk, asterisk. The belief that no matter how impossible the odds, no matter how much they had been crushed, humans would always rise again. They would never stay down. Nira's grip on the blaster remained firm. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, could feel the deep, burning fire of her resolve. I don't need to understand you, Ruth. I just need to stop you. In one fluid motion, she raised the blaster, aimed directly at Ruth's chest, and fired. The shot rang out like a crack of thunder, but Ruth didn't move. The energy blast stopped mere inches from his chest, hovering in the air, caught in a field of energy that seemed to bend and distort around him. His eyes widened for a split second, But then his lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Asterisk, asterisk, you're too late. The words were barely audible as Ruth stepped back, his hand raised. The energy field around him pulsed, and the blaster was wrenched from Nira's hand, floating into the air before landing in his grasp. Nira's heart sank, her mind racing. She had never imagined this. The Empire's technology was far beyond anything she had expected. Ruth looked at her for a long moment, his gaze almost pitying. You're strong, but you're not ready. The Empire is too powerful for you to defeat on your own. But Nira wasn't done. She wasn't finished. She wasn't going to let him in the heat of the moment. She reached for a hidden dagger at her side, a weapon she had kept for times like these. Before Ruth could react, Nira lunged forward, catching him off guard. The knife cut through the air, and Ruth barely managed to deflect it, but not before Nira's blade scraped across his shoulder. The general staggered back, his face darkening with both anger and respect. Asterisk, asterisk, so this is how it ends, then? Ruth said, his voice now edged with something unexpected. Asterisk, asterisk, admiration. Asterisk, 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 this is how it begins. Asterisk, asterisk, Nira shot back, her voice unwavering, as she steadied herself for the final confrontation. Ruth raised his hand again, this time more forcefully, but just as he did, an explosion rocked the ship, and alarms blared throughout the corridors. Nira knew this was it. The Titan was under attack. The Resistance fighters had made their move. The ship was being torn apart around them, and in that chaos, Nira saw her opportunity. She lunged again, striking with everything she had, her anger, her pain, her years of training and suffering. This time, the blade found its mark. Ruth fell to the ground, his life fading away as the light of the Empire began to flicker out. His eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of understanding passing between them in his final moments. Asterisk, asterisk, you've won. Asterisk, asterisk, he whispered, his voice barely a breath. Nira stood over him, breathing heavily, her entire body shaking with the weight of what she had just done. No, humanity won. The Empire's grip on the galaxy had finally begun to loosen. Nira knew the battle was far from over, but the first step had been taken. The spark of resistance had ignited a fire that could never be extinguished. Humanity had proven that no matter how dark the galaxy became, they would always rise. They would always fight back.